after the start of the Arab awakening or the Arab Spring, I think it was already in May of last year, they came up with a new policy proposal, Mediterranean policy of the EU, which included Turkey. It was for the first time that the EU acknowledged in a way that we can better reach our aims of a liberal economy, of a democratic society, by cooperating with Turkey, because Turkey has some advantages that we Europeans don't have. One is cultural affinity, the fact that many Egyptians, if you would ask them, how would you like your country to become, they would probably not come up with Finland, but would say, well, more or less like Turkey or whatever. So you're right, and the doubts behind your question I can fully understand, but I'm in a way hopeful that now in this particular situation, where Turkey and the EU both have an interest of having an impact on these new Arab democracies, and this, I mean, we're talking here about democratization in Turkey, but what about democratization in the Arab world? I mean, that's a long-term process. I have good hopes that the EU has got it, that they have to work together, and they have to work with Turkey. That's exactly what they wrote down on paper. Now the big challenge is, of course, how do you do that in reality and in practice? There, I have to confess, I have to admit, it's very little. I mean, it's not going against that policy, but there has very little practical results yet. That has also to do with Turkey. Turkey, who is now so confident that they can do it on their own, that Turkey is not very willing or eager to cooperate with the EU, which they see, or some see, as an institution that is going down the drain, economically damned and morally cursed. I mean, so there are a lot of hesitations in Turkey as well to cooperate with the EU, but I think that both could and should profit from that. AK Party and its position towards, I would cover both BDP and the PKK. I mean, I always thought it was a mistake of the AK Party from 2007 onwards, when BDP entered into the Turkish parliament, that they didn't look for a common position on the Kurdish issue. I mean, they were both representing the Kurds. CHP and MHP, they didn't get hardly any Kurdish votes. So it was a unique opportunity to strike a deal. And that's why the 2009 democratic initiative seemed to be going in the right direction. But at the same time, there was always from the start this electoral competition. If AK Party gets the credits, BDP will lose. If BDP gets too many credits, AK Party will lose. So we don't want to be seen as the one who is giving the initiative to the other. While saying this and doing these policies in 2009, we now know that most probably already from 2008 onwards, representatives of the government or of MIT or whoever were negotiating with Öcalan on a political solution. So this is a typical behavior of a state faced with terrorism. Remember Mrs. Thatcher, Iron Lady, no deal with the IRA. What were her civil servants and Secret Service doing at the same time? They were negotiating with Jerry Adam and Martin McGuinness in a hideaway place, trying to find a political solution. That is exactly what most probably the Turkish state did over the last couple of years. So there is a double rhetoric. There is this us being tough against the BDP, and at the same time realizing, knowing that at the end of the day, without the approval or the agreement with Öcalan, there would not be a deal. That's why I think they are so pissed off now and disappointed with the fact that Öcalan couldn't deliver. There was a deal with Öcalan, and the layout of that is more or less known, and it's quite progressive, quite liberal. Quite a lot of those demands would have been fulfilled, but then another wing of the PKK, that's my analysis, wanted to destroy the whole process. They started attacking again. Öcalan was outmaneuvered, and AK Party was so pissed off with the Kurds that they now are trying to arrest everybody and bomb the rest, which is not going to take them anywhere. They will have to go back to the negotiating table with the same guys, but it will take some time. At the same time, they should have been more clever towards the BDP. If you're, and that's what Tayyip Erdogan said, I'm going to fight the ones who fight us, but I want to talk to the Kurds that are in favor of political solutions. He did the first part of his promise, but he didn't deliver on the second part. He's not talking to the political representatives of the Kurds. He could make them more important. He could make them a party in this whole conflict. So these are the two questions that were, maybe I leave CHP to It's your favorite subject, Mustafa, so I'm quite willing to give the CHP to you. Is a Kurdish autonomous province possible? Why not? I mean, it depends on the definition of autonomy. I mean, if you listen to some Kurdish representatives, it seems almost like an independent country with an own flag, an own army, etc. That would not be my definition of an autonomous Kurdish province. There are many examples in Spain, in Germany, in other countries of the world where there are autonomous regions that have quite a lot to say about education in their region or about public facilities, but that don't have their own army or they don't have their own foreign minister. So it needs to be discussed, but it's almost a taboo. I mean, you mention the word federalism and you're almost kicked out of the room in Turkey. So it's a political taboo to talk about how to organize the Turkish state in such a way that it's more effective, more democratic, and I think gives rights to a certain extent to autonomous governments. Again, not only in the southeast, but also in the Black Sea region and in Izmir. That is possible. Why would it not be possible in Turkey if it is being done in so many other European countries?
In Turkey, as far as we look at Turkey from the other point of view, we see that AKP is getting quite positive progress in the whole history, and they are doing quite good things. For example, not only in respect of the military or media, or as you have told about the Kurdish people, they have progressed a lot of things. But from my point of view, there should be done a lot. My question is, as far as we see from outside of the Turkey, that AKP is close to everybody with the same respect, with the same sphere. But last news that there are, and we also witnessed that outside of Turkey, for example, Mr. Gülen community, they are doing quite good things. They are investing in people, in human beings. They have quite a lot of schools outside of Turkey, in the United States, in Holland, in Germany, anywhere. But they are investing in youth, in human beings, in young child. And in the last news, we have seen that there is, well, we are not sure yet. There's a gap between AKP and Mr. Gülen community. What do you think about this issue? Thank you very much.
The Gülen movement, if you don't know, it's like probably the most notable Islamic community in Turkey, with hundreds of schools in Turkey and elsewhere. And by using the global current terminology, it's a very moderate movement focused on a Sufi, tradition in Islam. Has been very tolerant to non-Muslims in Turkey, and I think one of the best contributions of Gülen movement in Turkey has been to combat against anti-Semitism and anti-Christian bias, which is unfortunately a big problem in our society. By being friends with the chief rabbi in Turkey or the ecumenical patriarchate, Fethullah Gülen, the leader of the community, has helped breaking up some of the negative attitudes. And they have been supportive of the AKP by and large, especially in the face of the establishment wrath against the AKP, which would probably lead to a coup if it was unchecked. But there are points of differences between the AKP and I mean, there are some disagreements here and there. And I sometimes, I agree with the AKP on that disagreement. Sometimes I agree with the Gülen movement. Sometimes I disagree with both. But I think these are not huge disagreements. And although now Turkish media these days is discussing this big friction between the Turkish Central Intelligence Agency and a Turkish prosecutor, and interpreting this as probably a conflict between the views of the Gülen movement and the AKP, I am not sure how accurate that interpretation is. I see Zaman generally supporting the AKP reforms, but criticizing the AKP for not doing enough reforms, or sometimes criticizing Erdogan for being not very fond of criticism, as you said, which is very true. I think our prime minister should not bash journalists when he makes a speech, and he should be more tolerant to criticism. And I think there are times that I agree with that. I sometimes find the Gulen movement sometimes a bit too much pushing for the Ergenekon pursuits. That's important, but there are also, I see some excesses in the Ergenekon case, like the rest of these journalists. So I sometimes disagree with that. But I think in general, these two movements, which is a political party, which is a social movement, so they're not rivals, they both believe in a Turkey which is by and large more democratic, more free. And they have been, of course, they have been suffering from the same vicious secularist national state establishment. So I think their friendship will go on with some disagreements. And that's healthy for Turkey. I would worry if all conservatives in Turkey agree on everything. That would be a very boring and a very, illiberal Turkey ultimately. It's good that they have these disagreements that's coming to the fore, and I'm sure there will be more of them, and it's welcome. So, but I don't see this as a big internal struggle in the conservative camp, which is not the case.
Brief, I promise you. On the tension or the contradictions between the AK Party and the Gulen movement, it's clear that they are there. They are stronger than, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. If you look at some of the examples where there was a strong criticism from the Gulen movement on the government, was, for instance, on the match fixing law, diminishing the penalties for people involved in match fixing. A law proposed by AK Party, opposed by the president, and opposed by the Gulen movement as well. Another example was the Uludre bombing, the killing of 34 innocent people. There was a strong push for an apology, which the government didn't want to give. I think in both cases you can see that there is the fear that AK Party has settled with the army and with the football mafia. And that the AK Party should continue reforms. That's how I interpret part of the criticism on AK Party, that in both cases, AK Party Prime Minister was praising the General Staff, and they did very well. And he simply didn't want to go into an apology, which was, I think, a big missed chance for this government. And with the match fixing, it seems, because the law has been adopted, that this was a Fenerbahce law. Now, I'm a Fenerbahce fan, so I'm in a difficult position there. But I do believe, I would say the same for Feyenoord in the Netherlands. If they would, Okay. I've made the point here. I can see. If my team would be involved in dirty business, I think it should be investigated. And I'm not so sure that Fenerbahce is not, or Aziz Yildirim is not involved in dirty business. So I think it's a good thing to go after that, to investigate that, and then to punish accordingly, and not say in advance we diminish all the penalties. So don't settle. That was my fear at the end of my introduction. As an AK Party, don't settle with the status quo, because the status quo will get you one day. And I think that's the fear that is strongly felt in parts of the Gulen movement, who have been, repressed and are still afraid that if you give up on reforms now, the old guard will come back through the.
Good evening. My name is Sayın Işanen. I have 2 questions to both of you. First one is about the freedom of media in Turkey. You were talking about freedom of media. Okay, I think it's true that the media cannot always write what they think, because the authorities always not allow that. But don't you think within the media they need also reform? Because if I watch the news in Turkey, I cannot always trust the news what I read. When you watch head news at 6 o'clock, it's taking about 8 hours, and it's more a magazine than a news. And I think the media itself has to change itself also. And if they need to change, how can do they that?
Well, the French ban on the ideas about the French ban on whether you should call the Armenian expulsion of 1915, they gotta call it, as genocide or not. I think France is very wrong and very illiberal in having a legislation on what people should think about history. We have been very illiberal and very wrong to persecute people